The cabin, my sanctum of solace and escape, stood distant now, an unreachable relic of my past joys, while I stood frozen at the precipice of loss, with eyes glistening and heart aching, feeling the weight of the world as it unraveled into despair. I can still smell the sun-warmed pine and hear the echo of laughter bouncing off the cabin walls. It feels as if the place pulsed with the memories I painstakingly built with my bare hands. Hours spent sanding down knotted wood, painting faded walls, and patching up a roof that threatened to cave in. I thought it was ours forever, tucked away by the lakeside, untouched by time and chaos. But in an instant, reality fractured. My uncle, with a look of what seemed like guilt smeared across his face, dropped the news like a boulder into the still waters of my life. The family cabin, the one I dedicated years to renovating, had been sold. Just like that. His words lingered in the dense air, heavy and irreversible, and I felt an absurd mix of betrayal and loss gnawing at my insides. But there was more, a twist yet untold, a reason hidden beneath the surface that I was hell-bent on uncovering. The cabin loomed in my mind, a specter of everything I'd woven into my dreams. I found him in the small, cluttered office of his home. My heart thudded, each beat pounding against my ribcage as if trying to break free. He sat there like nothing was wrong, buried under papers and receipts, as if the world hadn't just come crashing down. "Uncle," my voice cracked, betraying me with its frailty. His head lifted, eyes meeting mine with an infuriatingly calm gaze. I stepped deeper into the room, closer to the truth I feared. The air felt heavy, thick with the weight of betrayal. "How could you sell it?" I let the question fly, fueled by a mix of confusion and rage. "I put everything into that cabin. It was supposed to be ours, forever, a sanctuary." My words sliced through the stillness, jagged and raw. His expression barely shifted, a slight wince perhaps, but nothing more. "It wasn't an easy decision," he murmured, his voice like gravel, every word grating against my nerves. "Not easy." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. I couldn't understand. How could he be so composed, so detached? "Do you know what that place means to me? To us? It's all we had left of them." He looked away, a flicker of something in his eye, regret, maybe shame. Hard to tell. His fingers toyed with a pen, a nervous habit I'd never noticed before. "We needed the money," he finally said, the words falling between us like a death sentence. "Money." The room spun slightly at this revelation. "Is money all you can think about?" This was about more than dollars and cents. "Listen," he began, shifting uncomfortably. "I had no choice. Some debts, they were pressing, and debts." I was shouting now, my voice ricocheting off the walls. My fists clenched, nails biting into palms. "Why didn't you say something? Why hide this?" The silence that followed was dense, oppressive. I searched his face for answers, something that might stitch together the fragments of our unraveling bond. But his eyes were tired, resigned, as if carrying burdens I couldn't comprehend. "I didn't want to worry you," he said, finally meeting my gaze, that infuriating calm returning. "And there are things you don't know." "What things?" My heart pounded louder, matching the intensity of my anger. "What aren't you telling me?" He sighed, a sound heavy with age and weariness. "It's complicated," he replied, evasive, leaving more questions than answers in its wake. "Just give me time." Time. Time I'd invested in the cabin, in us. And now it felt like time was slipping away, ignorant of the ruin it left behind. A deep, stubborn ache formed in my chest as I turned to leave, the shadows of our unspoken words lingering like ghosts in the now too small room. "I'm trying to understand, but you're making it impossible," I say, my voice brimming with a frustration that's long been building. We're in the back room of my uncle's cramped office, stacks of untouched paperwork threatening to topple over like solemn, dusty tombstones. The air feels thick, almost suffocating, with the pungent odor of stale coffee and something sweeter, more decaying. My uncle stands by the window, hands buried deep in the pockets of his torn jeans. The afternoon light cuts across his face, harshly accentuating the shadows under his eyes. He doesn't meet my gaze, his focus instead on the parking lot below, watching the world move on without him. "You think I wanted this?" His voice is hoarse, almost whispering against the hum of the old electric fan, trying its futile best against the summer heat. "I didn't want to, believe me. But you don't understand, the debts, things got complicated. There's a thick silence, interrupted only by the fan's monotonous rhythm. I shift in my chair, the metal creaking beneath me, a sound that seems to punctuate the distance growing between us. I can't help but wonder how much of the man before me is still the uncle I once idolized. His eyes flicker back to mine for the briefest moment before drifting away, evading the confrontation. What happened? I press, my patience strung taut. What aren't you telling me? He sighs heavily, shoulders slumping as though crushed by a weight too evident to bear. It started small, he begins, each word carefully chosen, as if walking a minefield. A couple of missed payments, then interest piled on faster than I could handle. I thought I could manage, thought I could fix it before anyone got hurt. But you sold it. I snap, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. You sold the only thing we had left. He flinches at that, eyes narrowing with a mix of defensiveness and something else, a flicker of fear, raw and exposed. You don't know them, he says, finally turning to meet my gaze head-on. His eyes are slick with an unreadable glaze. They don't take kindly to delays. His words sink into me slowly, the revelation sliding beneath my skin and taking root. I don't know what to say, how to reconcile the betrayal of what he's done with the man now seeming to founder before me, a figure teetering on the edge of collapse. The muffled sounds of the world outside intrude, a car engine revving, laughter of children playing, all so far removed from the visceral storm wreaking havoc within these four walls. I find myself leaning back, the cheap fabric of the chair feels abrasive against my skin. What are you going to do now? I ask finally, the question spilling out like water from a breached dam, impossible to hold back. He looks at me as if there's an answer to be found in my eyes, but settles only on a shaky sigh, pregnant with the cowardice of decisions unmade. I don't know, he murmurs, almost to himself, his voice barely more than a fragile whisper hanging in the air. The dust in the old study clung to the bookshelves like an unwelcome visitor, as if it had been left to settle undisturbed for years. The air was heavy with the scent of aged paper and dried ink, a reminder of the late nights my father spent poring over these very records. My fingers trembled slightly as I turned the brittle pages, the financial statements unfurling their secrets like whispered confessions to those patient enough to listen. As I flipped through the stained documents, I muttered under my breath, each page turning with a weighty significance. The numbers didn't add up. The figures danced erratically before my eyes, columns misaligned as if someone had rushed to hide a trail. It made no sense. My family was never frivolous. We built our life on carefully measured steps. Every transaction a reflection of frugality and foresight. Anxiety curled in my stomach, sharp and insistent. There was more here than the straightforward reality of a family business teetering on the brink. I felt it with a certainty that bordered on dread. The monetary discrepancies I uncovered were more than just numbers spiraling into the negative. They were echoes of something much more sinister. Each miscalculation was a pinprick in the fragile balloon of hope I clung to, hissing deceit into the room around me. Sweat dampened my palm as I felt the pressure, a tight coil around my spine. Something was very wrong beneath the surface. I whispered again, the admission tasting bitter. Was it embezzlement from within or threats imposed by some shadowy, external force? I could almost hear the ghosts of unspoken secrets, their voices weaving between the cracks in the walls. A frantic need to understand, to unravel the tangled threads of deception, gripped me in its relentless hold. I pushed the leather-bound ledger away, its bulk heavy with unvoiced accusations. How many others had sat here, in this very chair, trying to reconcile the unreadable? The chair creaked as I stood abruptly, a determination now setting my jaw tight. If there was an answer, it lay buried in this sepulchral corner of our home. But I feared the truths waiting for me in the margins might be ones I wasn't ready to confront. I could feel a chill creeping down my spine, pooling around my feet like icy water from a slowed tide. The study had once been a sanctuary, but now it felt more like a trap, each shadowed corner potential hiding places for the truths I sought. My heart pounded painfully against my ribs, a drumbeat driving me forward. I had to find out what lay behind the numbers, the decisions, the lies. I whispered a promise into the silence, one final vow to the room and the truths it had sheltered for too long. I would tear open this wound and examine the infection beneath, regardless of the pain or price. Tell me everything. No more lies. What kind of mess are we really in? My voice bounces off the faded wood-paneled walls of the cramped den. Dust particles float lazily in the shaft of sunlight, clawing its way through the heavy curtains. The room caught in a pause between present and past. I face him, my uncle, who sits in that familiar armchair. The one he always claimed after long days filled with stories I adored, his words then honey rather than venom. He fidgets, fingers picking at the wear in the armrest, a nervous habit I'd never noticed before. It's not what you think, he starts, but the rest of his sentence melts away in the simmering anger beneath my skin, threatening to erupt. What is it then? I snap, leaning in, feeling the edge of hope mingling with despair, a volatile mix that leaves me dizzy. I lay the papers, those damning records, on the coffee table between us. They spread out like cards in a rigged game, truths I've pieced together like cold, hard puzzles. Numbers, missed payments, loans morph into sharp-edged whispers I hadn't wanted to hear. His eyes dart over the documents, then flicker to mine, dodging the quiet accusation. The silence stretches, pulling taut until I fear it will snap and leave us both bleeding with secrets. It's not. I had no choice, he says, his voice barely a crackle above the tension. He looks older under the stark light, lines deep and unforgiving, shadows of a man unraveling in secrets intended to protect. Or so I want to believe. I needed help, a lot of it. Help for what? I demand, though the answer prickles at the edges of my consciousness, an itch of dread I desperately try to ignore. The cabin was meant to be ours forever, a bastion against the world's encroachments, and now it's gone because of reasons he won't confess. He breathes deeply, his chest rising and collapsing like a weary wave. The debts, he says, and this time the words carry the weight of confession. They crept in. His voice catches, and then he swallows, looking at the papers as if they have the power to strip him bare. I didn't want to burden you. But now, it's all crashing down, and it turns out the burden is mine anyway. My anger splinters, falling into the kind of helplessness that makes my hands tremble. He's in it, deeper than I imagined, lost to decisions that ripple through our lives like a stone thrown into too small a pond. Why didn't you tell me? I manage, and it's not an accusation anymore, just raw, open, pleading. He bows his head, a gesture of surrender and weariness. I'm sorry, he whispers, releasing a secret I've long suspected but dreaded acknowledging. The air between us settles, heavy with unspoken truths, as our lives pivot on the precipice of his wearied honesty. The room felt colder than it ought to be, the walls closing in while my uncle sat there, head in his hands, as if expecting them to crush him. I could hear his uneven breath, almost see the weight on his shoulders, as though he were Atlas himself. The air was thick with words unsaid, accusations hovering between us like ghosts. His voice, when it finally came, was rough, ragged, as though he'd dug it up from some dark place inside himself. I didn't want it to come to this, he mumbled, eyes not meeting mine. Silence, the kind that fills up rooms and souls alike. Then, bracing myself against the wave of emotions, I asked, what exactly did it come to, Uncle? He looked up, his eyes rimmed with desperation. You don't understand. This isn't just about money. His gaze dropped again, fixed on the worn carpet. They threatened our safety. Selling the cabin was the only way out. For a heartbeat, my mind refused to process his words. The cabin sold? To keep us safe? I had imagined betrayal, greed, never this. His confession twisted something inside me, anger dissolving into a muddled mess of confusion and fear. What do you mean, keeping us safe? I demanded, though the tremor in my voice betrayed more than bravery. Who were you dealing with? He leaned back, the chair groaning under him, and closed his eyes as if he could shut out the world. Shady figures, he said finally. A long time ago, I took a loan, thinking I could handle it. They weren't the sort you want to owe anything. They came after me, then after us. The image of shadowy figures lurking around our lives caused a shiver to race down my spine. Why didn't you tell us sooner? We could have helped. He shook his head, weariness etched into his every feature. And what? Drag you into this mess, too? The cabin, his voice broke there, a momentary fracture I'm not sure he meant to reveal. Losing it was supposed to be the last of it. I didn't want to pull you into the darkness I've been grappling with. I watched him, this man I'd both loved and loathed, seeing him anew, vulnerability raw and unguarded. The betrayal I'd felt was still there, wound nestled under my skin, but it was dwarfed now by something else. A deeper understanding, perhaps, a realization of the lengths desperation could drive people to. His confession left me standing at a precipice, unsure how to bridge the chasm it had opened. As silence reclaimed the space between us, I sat down beside him, the loud thud of my own heart a strangled chorus in the dying daylight. I reached out, my hand finding his in a halting, hesitant move. "We'll figure this out," I said, the words a tentative promise, one I wasn't sure I knew how to keep. But it was something. It had to be enough for now. The room feels colder than usual, shadows stretch from the corners as I sit at the table, the bills spread out like a deck of accusing cards. Every number etched in ink might as well be etched onto my skin. I clutch the edges of the table, knuckles white. The distant hum of the refrigerator fills the silence, an odd comfort amidst the chaos in my head. Earlier today, I found myself standing in the shower, water rushing over me, eyes closed. And in that moment, it struck me like a wave, a clarity that washed away the paralysis that had held me tight for too long. I'm done being stuck in this loop, letting helplessness dictate my every move. It's burning inside me now, a determination that refuses to be snuffed out. We won't be beaten by this, I told myself then. It's time to wield whatever little power I have and turn this around. As I look at the papers once more, determination crystallizes. There has to be a way to renegotiate these debts, find angles we haven't explored. Yes, the calls are relentless, and the letters never stop. But this fight isn't over. Not yet. This isn't over. I won't let them win. We'll find a way out, together. I say aloud, the words foreign but liberating as they echo in the silence. It's like a lifeline, a bridge stretching out over a chasm that seemed unbridgeable for too long. The quiet sound of footsteps draws me from my thoughts. The door creaks open slightly, and I catch a glimpse of Sarah's small face peering through, eyes wide and filled with an innocence I can't bear to taint with worry. I smile, trying on this newfound determination for size, and wave her over. She lingers in the doorway, hesitant, before crossing the threshold with practiced caution. "Dad?" she asks, voice small. "Are we going to be okay?" Heat rushes to my eyes, but I swallow it down, nodding. "Yeah, kiddo. We will. I promise." Her gaze lingers on mine, searching, and for a moment, the weight eases just a fraction. She believes me, I can tell. And it's that belief that fuels me even more. We share the moment. Nothing else matters but her trust in me. When she finally turns away, slipping back into her world of toys and cartoons, I return to the table, pulling the stack of papers closer. Each one is an obstacle, but also a stepping stone. I start making notes in the margins, words of encouragement, battle plans against the tide. The flutter of paper becomes a rhythm, grounding and persistent. I may not have all the answers yet, but I am beyond standing on the sidelines, powerless. In this quiet war of endurance, I choose to fight back. One step at a time, one choice at a time. I am redefining us, reclaiming us from the jaws of this consuming despair. The air hung heavy as I pushed open the creaky door of the coffee shop, a quaint place nestled between a thrift store and a laundromat. The bells chimed softly, a sound that seemed to echo far too loudly in my ears against the quiet murmur of patrons lost in their own worlds. The buyer sat at a corner table, an elegantly composed woman and a man in a sharp suit. Both wore expressions carefully constructed to be polite, yet unreadable. I felt an unfamiliar tightening in my gut. This was it. My heart drummed a painfully fast, erratic beat as I crossed the room towards them. Every step seemed to echo, a hollow reminder of my own desperation. As I drew near, they glanced up, and I tried to match their composed grace. "Thank you for meeting with me," I muttered, sliding onto the seat opposite them. The woman inclined her head slightly, a gesture inviting me to speak. "Look," I said, trying to steady the quiver in my voice. "This cabin, it means everything to me. It's more than just a property. My eyes met hers, pleading I hoped. It's my father's legacy." Her gaze didn't waver, but the man shifted, glancing at some unseen spot just beyond my shoulder. "We appreciate the sentiments," he began, his voice measured. but we've already outlined our terms with your uncle. I swallowed my frustration, every word feeling like it caught in my throat. Please, I continued, give me a chance to make this right. I need that cabin more than you know. The woman leaned forward slightly, her fingers steepled under her chin. And what exactly are you proposing? She asked, her voice smooth, but with an edge of curiosity. A flicker of hope sparked, an ember in a cold, dark room. I took a deep breath. I propose a financial arrangement. I could pay you over time. Maybe partner with you in some way. You don't have to take it away completely. A pause stretched, and I could hear the soft clinking of a teaspoon against a porcelain cup from the next table. The woman exchanged a look with her partner, an entire silent conversation that wound through their eyes. Then the man sighed, a low rumble that seemed to signal the end of some internal debate. We have to be practical, he said, with a tone teetering on the edge of patience. Our interest was purely investment, nothing personal, just business. Desperation clawed at my insides. But it is personal for me. I interjected sharply, the edge of my own words surprising me. I understand business, but I'm asking. No, I'm begging for some empathy here. Silence settled over the table, thick and oppressive. The woman shifted, then spoke with a softened tone. We'll consider it. But know that you'll need to come up with something truly compelling. I nodded, swallowing hard as they stood up, their decision not yet a resounding no, a lifeline, however thin. As their figures disappeared through the doorway, the lingering scent of espresso mingled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty, leaving me suspended in the thick of both. The room felt like a tightening noose, every word exchanged between the suited powerhouses around the table pulling it a little tighter. Their voices buzzed, rising and dipping like an erratic tide against the backdrop of my silent dread. I gripped the edge of my chair as if bracing against a physical force, my knuckles whitening, my breath shallow. Negotiation wasn't merely failing. It was collapsing around me like an avalanche I was helpless to stop. Let's not drag this out, shall we? The lead buyer's voice pierced the air, sharp and conclusive, like the snap of a door being slammed shut. Each syllable was a step, pushing me closer to the brink of a precipice I dreaded. I nodded, my swallowing dry, the knot in my stomach tightening. In that moment, the air bowed and shifted, and from the fringe of the buyer's retinue, a voice cut through the tension, soft yet insistent. Wait, there might be another way, something that keeps it in your hands. The voice belonged to a woman I'd barely noticed, her presence until now shrouded by the imposing figures of her colleagues. The room's attention pivoted, skepticism mingling with a flicker of curiosity. I held my breath, daring hope to surface amidst the internal chaos. My eyes sought hers, trying to gauge the depth of sincerity in those words. She looked at me then, a steady, unguarded gaze that had its own quiet gravity. What are you suggesting? I heard myself ask, my voice thin and strained, as though tapped of all its strength. A subtle shift in her posture suggested she was weighing her next words carefully, with an awareness of their potential impact on a room teetering on the edge. There's a clause we can negotiate, she offered, a hint of challenge sparking through her pragmatism. It wouldn't be easy, but it's not impossible. Her words painted a fragile scaffold in my mind, something to grasp at, but equally something that could collapse under the weight of scrutiny. Blood rushing in my ears, I leaned closer, almost desperate to clutch onto any glimpse of optimism she might spill forth. It was a precarious balance, hope hinging on a delicate thread she began to spin for us. Faces around the table turned into a spectrum of restrained anticipation, curiosity mingling with reluctance. The lead negotiator seemed to assess her for a suspended moment, then nodded, a reluctant sort of acquiescence. Her proposal unfolded with a clarity that began knitting together the frayed edges of my spirit. She navigated the tense formalities with an elegance that cut through the fog of dead-end deliberations. As she pieced the puzzle together, infusing the fading conversation with a sense of possibility, the coil in my chest began to loosen. With every phrase from her lips, I felt the pendulum of fate waver, shifting the axis on which my fears hung. She looked at me again, her eyes promising nothing but a glimmer of hope, yet in that moment, it felt like the dawn breaking over a long, suffocating night. My heart dared to believe in the chance to reclaim everything I thought was slipping away. The drive home felt like a breath held too long. My fingers danced nervously along the textured leather of the steering wheel, the tremor reaching my bones. Each tick of the indicator echoed in the silent car, a countdown to the confrontation waiting by the old fireplace, where so much of our story had gone up in smoke. I pushed open the front door, the familiar creak a reluctant greeting. The scent of pine mingled with the faintest hint of cigar smoke, nostalgic and annoying, all at once. Uncle Joe sat in his worn armchair, the fabric imprinted with years of his weight. He looked up, eyes narrowing against the dim light, a man accustomed to disappointment but still surprised by its persistence. "Back already?" he asked, his voice a rough scrape against the stillness. I nodded, the paper in my pocket suddenly heavy. It was more than a deal. It was history folded into hope. "We need to talk," I said, trying to match his calm. A flicker of something like fear crossed his face, quickly masked by a familiar stoicism. I sat across from him, feeling the dip of the couch accept me like an old friend. For a moment, we just sat, the ticking clock measuring the tension between us. I handed him the document, the rustle of paper unnervingly loud. He hesitated before taking it, a moment stretched thin with memory. The fire crackled in the background, a fitting soundtrack to our combustible relationship. He skimmed the text, and for the first time, I saw his resolve waver. Relief loosened his jaw as he sighed deeply, the sound swelling into the room like a storm receding. "You did it," he murmured, and there was something like awe in his voice. "I had to," I replied, my tone brimming with defiance and something softer. "We'll get it back, piece by piece, just like we always have." His eyes met mine, and in that instant, we were two sorry souls caught in the tangle of healing and kinship. His hand, gnarled and scarred, reached to clasp my shoulder. It was awkward, out of practice, but there was a warmth that hadn't been there in years. I felt my breath catch, old resentments finally exhaling out of my lungs, making room for the new. "I brought back the papers, but it's your call if we go through with it," I said, knowing the weight of it. The promise was there, unspoken, that we could mend what was broken if we just tried. Joe nodded, eyes misting ever so slightly. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of our reflection in the window, two shadows fused together with the promise of rebuilding. The past lingered in the corners, but for the first time in years, the future seemed brighter than the flickering flames. The morning light streams through the wide windows of the cabin, painting everything in hues of gold. I can feel the warmth on my skin, almost hear it. Everything feels crisp and new, like a page in a book waiting for our story to begin anew. We're sitting around the wooden table in the heart of the cabin, each of us clutching mugs of coffee and tea like their lifelines. My sister's laughter, warm and infectious, hangs in the air between us, wrapping around our shoulders like a comforting shawl. I look across the table at my father, his eyes soft in a way I haven't seen since I was a child. Our past grievances feel like they've been washed away, swept clean by the season's promise of rebirth. It isn't all said, not yet, but the hard, jagged edges of our old wounds are smoothing out. Just the hint of something real, something raw, begins to fill the space between us. Dad's voice is steady but gentle, like the current of the lake outside. "We'll rebuild the porch first," he says, eyes flicking to the weathered boards outside, the ones we neglected for too long. It's a simple statement, but heavy with the years of neglect we've allowed to seep into both our relationships and this place. My brother nods, his own resolve newfound, stronger. "I'll help. Let's start today," he offers, the determination clear in his voice. It's a truce of sorts, an olive branch extended across the table with chips and nails, laughter and sweat to bind it. I take a sip of my coffee, the warmth sliding down my throat, comforting. "And the old fishing boat," I add, my voice barely a whisper over the sudden lump in my throat. "It's been a while since we all went out." Mom looks up, eyes meeting mine, and there's something that shines there. A spark of the woman who once stood in tousled hair and stubborn strength against any storm that threatened her family. "Let's do it," she says, and it's more than just about the boat. Later, we're standing side by side along the edge of the lake, tools in hand, the wind a gentle caress on our skin. The scent of pine mingling with the fresh paint in the air opens something inside me, a floodgate of memories, of laughter, of arguments, of love, a rich tapestry woven through the years. As we stand by the lakeside together, I realize the cabin is more than a place. It's us, enduring and unbreakable, each nail and board a stitch in the fabric of our lives. It's imperfect and weathered, yet so are we, and maybe that's what makes us truly beautiful. Hope lingers in the wind that sweeps across the water, in the shared glances and the silent promises. The sun begins its descent, and with it, the knowledge that tomorrow we will gather here again, ready to face whatever comes, as long as we're together.